All right. Hi, everyone. So, welcome to chapter 9. We will be talking all about evaluating decentralized operations. Whoop, whoop, whoop. All right. So, as we usually start with every single chapter, I like to talk about maybe something a little bit relevant than sometimes what the book will give because it's a little dry. But this is my way of trying to spice it up and make it a little more relevant to the companies that maybe we're more familiar with or that we enjoy talking about, hearing about, or we have experience with their products. So your book talks a lot about Macy's, JCPenney's, and Sears, but I would like to switch that conversation and talk more so about Apple because I really enjoy their products. All right. So, in talking about these different companies, have you ever stopped and thought, why do companies or organizations have departments or divisions and regions? Why is it set up that way? Right. Um, and for a second, I would like you to think if you owned a business and you're the CEO, right? And it's a multi-billion dollar corporation or a multi-million dollar corporation. Can you imagine as the CEO, if you were in charge of making every single decision from hiring to firing to going into different markets to expanding in different markets to research and development? I mean, from start to finish, you had to make every small detailed decision, right? I would challenge you to think that it would make your job as CEO of this multi-million dollar company, it would make your job almost impossible to do because instead of thinking about the bigger picture and forecasting or looking into the future of the company, you're being bogged down with maybe smaller decisions that maybe a supervisor or a manager can answer, right? And so that's the reason why departments and divisions and regions are all created so that you can have maybe managers and supervisors handle those different type of product lines and decisions that go along with those different product lines. I also want to make sure that we understand that organizations are organized into departments because it allows retailers to provide products and expertise into those specialized areas. Now, going back to that CEO, yes, you are the CEO of the entire organization, but maybe you don't know the latest law and when it comes to HR, right? Or vacation leave, right? So this is why you're going to hire somebody in the maybe HR department that's specialized in that area to talk about or to manage the HR department, right? So you can again look at the bigger picture. So again, it helps them to make product decisions, evaluate operations, and guide company strategy. Okay. Another thing that I want to talk about is usually when you're divided into different divisions and things of that nature, um, it's a way that the company can evaluate managers and supervisors on how that division or product line is doing. So it can be a means of identifying and rewarding excellent performance, and it can be a way of taking corrective action in departments that are performing poorly, right? So in either case, what we're talking about in chapter 9 is looking at decentralized operations. How can Apple and all of these different corporations make responsible decisions for all of their different segments, right? And so that your C-suites or your executives or your CEOs are not bogged down with making those decisions. They can be made by other people that you trust in within the company. But before we move on to decentralized operations, I think it's important that we understand the difference between centralized and decentralized. They're almost on different ends of the spectrum. So if I could draw this for a second, right, I would say centralized is on this side of the spectrum, and then you have decentralized on this side of the spectrum. Okay. So let's talk about it. So decentralized operations, most of the major planning and operating decisions are made by top managers. Okay. So you can think of some great examples of this is like your small business owners, right? They're the ones that are making the decision as to, hey, do we buy more? Do we hire more people? Do we fire people? Do we lay people off? Do we increase our inventory? Things of that nature, right? And this may be a desirable. This may be desirable because it ensures the business is operated in the way that the owner wishes, right? So you can think of your mom and pop shops or the mid-sized companies, and if you have one owner, they're managing and running the organization exactly as they have seen fit since inception of the idea, right? So that's our example, and then I already named some advantages. They can run it in the manner that they want. But one of the disadvantages of that is that, again, going back to our introduction, is they're making decisions for the business all day, every day, right? So if a truck is held up, or if the product isn't coming in, or if someone's stealing, they're constantly making decisions for that business. And maybe that isn't as advantageous as you may think, because then how can they ever really have time to forecast and think of how the business will grow? Okay. Now with that, we're going to talk about the other side of the spectrum, which is decentralized operations. And this is where managers of separate divisions or units are given operating responsibilities. So again, going back to our Apple example, you can divide up divisions based on products, customers, or regions. So we know Apple, for instance, oh my goodness, they have so many products, right? They have the AirPods, they have the iPhones, they have the iPads, they have the Macs, they have on and on and on, right? They have all of these different products, right? So maybe for a company like Apple, they're separating all of their divisions or units by products, or maybe it can be by customers, or it can be by regions. So some examples of regions will be like the Northwest, the South, the Northeast. It can be Asia, it could be Europe, it could be the Americas, so forth and so on. So let's talk about some advantages of a decentralized organization. Okay. So some advantages is that it allows them to react to operating date more quickly. So if I have a manager that's in the southern region, as a corporation, it allows them, because they have responsibility and power in their particular region, if something is happening in that particular region, they're so close to the situation that they can make decisions because they're closest to it, right? Versus having a corporate partner trying to make decisions in another region. So a good example of this is, maybe you can think of like a Target, right? So if you don't know this, Target is based in Minneapolis, right? But we all know that there's Targets throughout the United States, right? And so maybe they're split up by different regions, right? So we live in the state of California, and California is on the West Coast. And so I can only imagine that maybe Target has a regional GM and a GM, and then, store leaders, right? And so when they're talking about the West Coast, if something happens on the West Coast, they're likely going to contact the regional manager because they're closest to that situation, and they're going to maybe talk to their department managers and so forth and so on, so that they can take a better handle on the situation versus having corporate, which is in Minneapolis, solve a West Coast problem. Also, another advantage of having a decentralized location is you create experts in the area. Because we're so close to the situation, I know my customers in the West Coast region better than I know maybe customers in the South, right? Or the Northwest, okay? It's also a training for managers. When you have decentralized organization, it's a training ground for managers because it allows them to be responsible for the customers, the profit, the revenue, things of that nature. And then lastly, it's more creative due to customer interaction. It allows the managers to be more creative because they're getting to know what their customer preferences are, what works, what doesn't work, versus having something so generic, right? But with that, let's talk about some of the disadvantages, okay? So some of the disadvantages of having a decentralized or operation is decisions made by one manager may negatively affect the company, right? So if there was maybe a manager that badly held or badly handle a situation, not only does it reflect badly on the store that they're operating in, but it reflects badly on the entire organization, right? And we've heard of so many organizations and so many situations like this. Also, another disadvantage is assets and expenses may be duplicated across divisions. So maybe, for instance, you have a sales team, right? But because you're operating within so many different regions, you're going to have so many different sales teams. But when you have a sales team, you also need the supporting staff, and that may be a secretary or accounts receivable, accounts payable, an HR department, right? And so wherever you have those sales team, you're duplicating all of the support staff to support them, right? Whereas if you were maybe more of a centralized organization, you would only have one HR department, one sales team, one accounts receivable person, so forth and so on. Okay, so hopefully that made sense to you, trying to explain the differences between centralized versus decentralized, and more specifically in decentralized, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages. So in the slides to come, we're going to talk more about this, more focused on decentralized operation.